The smell of freshly cut wood always brought me back to him. Not the man he is now, but the boy he was, with sawdust in his hair and a smudge of dirt on his cheek, holding up a lopsided birdhouse he'd built for me. His hands, small and determined, had crafted something out of love. I still have it on my porch. Sometimes I watch the sparrows nesting in it and wonder, how does the boy who built you a home from scrap wood become the man who wants to leave you with nothing? Before I explain what happened in that sterile white kitchen, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. My son Leo had always been my world, especially after his father passed. I poured everything I had into him, my time, my savings, my soul. So when he and his wife Chloe told me they'd found their dream home, I didn't hesitate. It was a beautiful house, I suppose, if you like things that feel like they belong in a magazine instead of a life. All white marble and sharp, clean lines. It was the kind of house that was afraid of fingerprints. The day I came over was meant to be a celebration. I'd spent a week knitting a soft canary yellow blanket for their baby on the way, my first grandchild. The yarn was expensive. Cashmere soft. And as I looped each stitch, I imagined my grandbaby wrapped in its warmth. In my love, I arrived at their new front door. The gift bag clutched in my hand like a lifeline. When Leo opened it, he smiled, but it was a tired, thin smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mom, you made it." Chloe appeared behind him, her hand possessively on his arm. She was beautiful, polished. Her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin around her eyes. She smiled too, a perfect, brilliant smile that felt as cold as the marble floors. "Natalia, welcome. We're just putting things away." They gave me the tour. Each room was a cavern of white and gray, minimalist furniture arranged with geometric precision. There were no photographs on the walls, no clutter on the counters. It felt less like a home and more like a showroom. A place where real life wasn't welcome. In the living room, I finally offered them the bag. "I brought something for the baby," I said, my voice softer than I intended. Chloe took the bag and pulled out the yellow blanket. She held it up between her thumb and forefinger as if it were a dirty rag. A small polite smile was fixed on her face. "Oh," she said. Just that one word. It hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "It's very bright." Leo shifted his weight, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, you know Chloe has a specific aesthetic for the nursery. Grays, muted tones. It's all very calming." My heart felt like a stone dropping in a deep well. I had poured a week of love, a week of dreams for this unborn child into that blanket, and they were seeing it as a color swatch that didn't match their decor. Was I being foolish? Did I misread everything? Have you ever poured your heart into a gift only to see it dismissed in an instant? I tried to salvage the moment to hide the hurt. "Oh, of course. I just thought yellow is such a happy color." Chloe folded the blanket neatly, but with a finality that felt like a dismissal, and placed it on the very edge of a sterile-looking armchair, as far from the center of the room as possible. "It's sweet of you to think of us, Natalia," she said, her tone making it clear the subject was closed. The rest of the afternoon was a tightrope walk of pleasantries over a canyon of unspoken tension. They spoke about their plans, their friends, the new life they were building in this perfect empty house. A life that I was beginning to realize was being meticulously curated to exclude anything that felt like me, anything messy or old or handmade. As I was getting ready to leave, feeling the chill of the house deep in my bones, Leo walked me to the door. "We're so grateful for your help with the down payment, Mom," he said, his voice low. "We couldn't have done this without you." The words were right, but they felt rehearsed, empty. It wasn't a down payment. I'd co-signed the entire mortgage using my own home, the one he grew up in, as collateral. It was a risk, a massive one, but I'd done it for his happiness, for the future of my grandchild. Looking at his face, then I saw the mask of the beautiful sun slip for just a second. Underneath was a stranger, a man exhausted by the effort of pretending. I was happy to do it, Leo, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You're my son. He nodded, but his eyes darted back toward the living room where Chloe was now standing watching us. Her arms were crossed, her perfect smile gone. She whispered something to him, too low for me to hear, and I saw his back straighten. The beautiful son vanished completely, replaced by a man with a cold resolve. He turned back to me, his face a hard, unreadable mask. Actually, Mom, he began, his voice losing all its warmth. Now that we're settling in, Chloe and I have been talking, there's something else we need to discuss about your visits from now on. His words hung in the air, a threat wrapped in the guise of a discussion. Chloe stepped forward slightly, her posture radiating a chilling confidence. The sound of her voice when it came was not loud, but it cut through the silence of that house like a shard of glass. We think it's best if you call before you visit from now on, Natalia. She used my first name, not Mom, not even the overly formal Mrs. Petrover she'd used when we first met. Just Natalia. It was a deliberate demotion, a stripping of my role, my identity. It was the sound of a border wall going up brick by cold brick. I stood there, my hand still on the doorknob, the metal cool against my skin. The word visits echoed in the vast empty space around us. It was a clinical word, a word for strangers or distant acquaintances, not for the mother who had held him, fed him, and loved him into existence. I looked at Leo, my son, searching his face for a flicker of protest, a sign that he didn't co-sign this cruel decree. But his eyes were fixed on a point just over my shoulder, his jaw set. The silence from him was my answer. It was louder than any insult she could have spoken. Call, I finally managed to say, my own voice sounding foreign and thin. Lo, I'm your mother. I've never had to call before. Leo finally met my gaze, and what I saw there terrified me. It wasn't anger. It was a profound and weary detachment, as if I were a problem he had finally decided to solve. It's just about setting boundaries, Mom, he said. The words sounding rehearsed, fed to him. It's what healthy families do. We need our own space, our own life. They were using words of therapy, words of reason to justify an act of pure emotional violence. How do you reason with people who use modern words to justify ancient forms of cruelty? A tremor started in my hands, a mixture of shock and a rising unfamiliar anger. Boundaries? You think this is about boundaries? I gave you everything, Leo. The roof over your head as a child, the money for your education, the collateral for this very house you're standing in. My love for you has never had boundaries. Chloe let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like ice cracking. That's the problem, Natalia. Your love is a lot. It's smothering. We're starting our own family now, a new family, and we get to decide how it runs. Her mask of politeness was gone, replaced by a raw and startling contempt. She saw me as an obstacle, a relic from a past he needed to shed in order to be her husband. I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. Was this who he had become? Or was this who he always was, and my love had been a blindfold I'd willingly worn for 30 years? I took a step back, my hand dropping from the doorknob. The fight went out of me, replaced by a deep aching grief. Fine, I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. If I am such a burden, then I will take my things and leave. I turned and walked back to the armchair where the little yellow blanket lay, a bright, hopeful thing in a room devoid of warmth. It was the last piece of me in this house, the last piece of my love, and I couldn't bear to leave it behind to be stored in a box or thrown away. I reached for it. As my fingers brushed against the soft yarn, Chloe's hand shot out and clamped down on my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my skin. Leave it, she hissed, her face inches from mine. We don't want it. The shock of her touch was like a lightning strike. In all my life, no one had ever laid a hand on me in anger. I looked from her venomous face to my son, a silent plea in my eyes. Save me. Say something. Be the boy I raised. But Leo didn't save me. He moved toward us, and for a heart-stopping second, I thought he was going to pull her away. Instead, he took my other arm. His grip was firm, unyielding. The hands that once built a birdhouse were now restraining me, siding with the woman who was hurting me. I was trapped between them. "Mom, just go," he said, his voice a low growl I'd never heard before. He was no longer my son. He was her husband, her enforcer. Together, they began to steer me, to force me back toward the front door. It wasn't a gentle guidance. It was a coarse physical removal, a shoving of an unwanted object out of their pristine home. My feet stumbled on the slick marble floor. I was dizzy with disbelief, with the pain in my wrist and the deeper pain in my soul. "Leo, please," I begged, the sound tearing from my throat. We reached the doorway, a gaping mouth, ready to spit me out into the cold evening air. He pulled the door open while she kept her grip on my arm. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared out into the darkness as if I were already gone. With a final brutal push from both of them, my body was propelled out of the house. My heel caught on the edge of the doorstep, and my balance gave way completely. The world spun in a nauseating blur of gray porch and black sky. Time seemed to slow as I fell, my body clumsy and untethered. All I could hear was the sharp definitive click of the front door shutting behind me, locking me out. And then there was only the sickening hard reality of the stone steps rushing up to meet me. The first thing I realized wasn't the pain. It was the silence. It was a profound, deliberate silence from the other side of the door. A silence that confirmed a horrifying truth. They were not going to open it. He was not coming for me. That was the real blow, the one that landed harder than the stone steps. It was the shocking final confession of his heart, a confession made without a single word. Then the pain arrived, a white-hot scream that started in my hip and spread through my entire body like a fire. I could feel the rough, cold texture of the concrete walkway against my cheek, each tiny groove and pebble a point of agony. There was a wetness on my chin, and when my tongue cautiously explored my lips, I tasted the coppery tang of blood. He had left me here, bleeding on his perfect sterile walkway. For how long, I didn't know. Time had become a thick, syrupy thing. I lay there listening. I listened for the sound of the lock turning, for the sound of footsteps, for the sound of my son's voice calling my name in concern. All I heard was the distant hum of traffic on the main road and the frantic, useless beating of my own heart against the unyielding stone. Grief, sharp and suffocating, washed over me. It wasn't just grief for my bruised body, but for the boy I had lost. Images flashed in my mind. Leo, age 6, crying after falling off his bike. My hands cleaning his scraped knee. Leo, age 16, pacing the floor, terrified before his first real date, my hand squeezing his shoulder. Leo, age 25, weeping at his father's funeral, my arms holding him up. I had been his comfort, his safe place, his rescuer. Now, as I lay broken at his door, I had to face the wreckage of that memory. Was I to blame? Did I love him too much, too fiercely? Did I shield him from so many of life's small pains that he never learned how to feel any pain but his own? Is there a greater pain than realizing the person you would die for is the one who left you to suffer? Each breath was a dagger of fire in my ribs. I had to move. I couldn't die here on his doorstep, a pathetic footnote to his new life. Gritting my teeth against a wave of nausea, I pressed my hands against the cold ground. The grit dug into my palms. Slowly, agonizingly, I pushed myself up, my left leg refusing to bear my weight. I half crawled, half dragged my body across the perfect lawn. The damp grass cool against my skin. Every inch a marathon of misery. The journey to my car, parked just 50 feet away, felt like crossing a desert. When I finally reached it, I clung to the door handle, my body trembling uncontrollably. Getting inside was a clumsy, painful ordeal that left me gasping, slumped over the steering wheel. The drive home was a blur. Tears mixed with the blood on my face, and every bump in the road sent a fresh explosion of pain through my hip. By the time I stumbled through my own front door, the door that had always been open to him, I was on the verge of collapsing. I leaned against the familiar wood, the scent of lemon polish and old books, a strange comfort in my new nightmare. I made my way to my armchair, the one he used to curl up in as a child, and sank into its soft embrace. That's when I saw my purse on the floor where I dropped it. My phone was inside. My hand shook as I pulled it out. Maybe he'd had a change of heart. Maybe there would be a dozen missed calls, a frantic text begging for forgiveness. The screen lit up. My heart stopped. There were no missed calls, no apologies. There was only one new message received 3 hours ago, just minutes after they had thrown me out. It was a small white bubble on a cold blue screen, an object that contained the end of my world. My thumb hovered over it before finally pressing down. The message opened. It was from Leo. 2 words and a period delivered with the sterile finality of a death sentence. It read, "Stay away from us." The words on the screen stayed cold and unblinking. Stay away from us. A command, an eraser. For a long moment, I felt nothing at all. Just a vast, hollow emptiness where a mother's heart used to be. And then something deep inside me, something I hadn't felt in 30 years, began to stir. It was a part of me I thought had died with my husband. A hard, pragmatic core of resilience that had been buried under decades of soft, unconditional love. That woman, the one who had faced down hospital administrators and navigated a world of grief alone, had been dormant for a very long time. Seeing those words, I felt her wake up. It was a long-hidden secret surfacing in the wreckage of my life. My son had broken my heart, but he had not broken me. The shock of that hidden truth was a brutal, clarifying slap. The son I had raised, the boy who loved my stories and held my hand in the dark, was a ghost. The man who existed now was a stranger, and he had just declared war. The tears that had been streaming down my face simply stopped. The searing pain in my hip receded to a dull, manageable ache, a grim reminder of the line that had been crossed. My focus, once blurred by love and denial, became razor-sharp. Have you ever had a moment of such painful clarity that it felt like waking up from a lifelong dream? That was me in that armchair waking up. My thumb moved over the screen. The cool glass feeling solid and real beneath my touch. I typed one word, the only reply that mattered, the only one he deserved. Okay. I didn't add a period. It felt more powerful without one. A quiet, chilling agreement. I pressed send, an acceptance, a promise, a door slamming shut forever. I let the phone drop onto the cushion beside me. My eyes, now clear, began to take in my surroundings, not as a grieving mother, but as a general surveying a battlefield. My gaze fell on a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. Leo at his high school graduation, his arm around me, both of us beaming. I had always seen pride and love in that picture. Now all I could see was a stranger in a costume playing a part. My eyes drifted past it through the window to the porch where the lopsided birdhouse stood silhouetted against the rising moon. A monument to a boy who no longer existed, built by hands that had shoved me into the dark. Then my sight settled on the heavy oak box sitting beside the fireplace. It was my husband's old document box filled with birth certificates, deeds, and wills. And inside in a thick manila folder were the mortgage papers for that cold White House. The papers that bound my home to his. The papers that held my signature right beside his name. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself out of the chair and hobbled over to the box. The wood was cool and solid under my trembling fingers. I lifted the heavy lid. There it was. The folder felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Weighted with the sacrifice and hope I had poured into it. I sat down at my small writing desk, opened the folder, and stared at the pages of dense legal text. My signature, looped and trusting, was a testament to a love that had been used as a weapon against me. I traced the line of ink. The bank wouldn't open for another 10 hours. I had time to think, to plan. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, quiet resolve that settled deep in my bones. I was no longer a victim in this story. I was the architect of its ending. Just as that thought solidified in my mind, a loud, insistent knock echoed from the front door. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a hard, urgent summons that made my heart leap into my throat. Fear. A cold and familiar snake coiled in my stomach. Who could be here at this hour? My mind raced. Was it him? Had he come to finish what he started? I pushed myself up, using the desk for support, my eyes darting around the room for something, anything to defend myself with. My gaze fell on the heavy brass poker from the fireplace set. I gripped its cool, solid weight in my hand. The brass poker felt heavy and foolish in my hand as I swung the door open. Elenina stood there, her hands on her hips, a plastic container of what smelled like jollof rice in her grasp. Her eyes, trained by 40 years of emergency room triage, took in my appearance in a single sweeping glance. The professional calm on her face dissolved into raw shock. "Sweet mother of mercy, Natalia," she breathed, her voice a low whistle that cut through the humid Lagos night. "What in God's name happened to your face?" Her question wasn't accusatory. It was a diagnosis. In that instant, the dam of my composure broke. The betrayal I had been holding in my chest as a silent personal poison was suddenly exposed to the light, and I couldn't hide it any longer. She pushed the door wider, her gaze flicking down to my hip, to the unnatural angle at which I was standing. "This isn't about the rice, is it?" she said, her voice dropping the neighborly pretense and taking on the firm, no-nonsense tone of a nurse taking charge. She set the container on my entryway table and guided me, one strong arm around my waist, back to the armchair. Outside, the familiar sounds of the night began to filter in, the distant, ever-present hum of generators, the cheerful chirp of geckos on the window screens, the faint blare of a car horn from the main road, sounds of a city teeming with life, a stark contrast to the cold, dead silence that had filled my son's home. Eleanor knelt before me, her touch gentle but firm as she examined my face, then my wrist. "This bruising, the swelling here," she murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Natalia, this wasn't a simple fall. You didn't do this to yourself by tripping over a rug. Tell me what happened." I opened my mouth, but only a dry sob came out. How could I say the words? How could I admit that the child I gave life to had tried to break me? Is there anything more powerful than having someone look at your pain and say, "I believe you," without a moment's hesitation? Elena waited, her patience, a solid, comforting presence in the room. Finally, I found my voice, a ragged whisper that grew stronger with each word of truth. "Leo," I said. "Leo and his wife. They pushed me." I told her everything. The blanket, the coldness, the demand for boundaries, the final violent shove out the door. She listened without interruption, her expression hardening from concern into a cold, quiet fury. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes or sympathies. She offered a verdict. "That's not a boundary, Natalia. That's an assault." She stood up, her movements crisp and decisive. "And we are not sitting here letting it fester. Your hip is badly injured. I can tell by the way you're holding it. We're going to the clinic now." I tried to protest. The thought of moving, of explaining this to strangers was overwhelming. "Eleanor, it's late. I know a good 24-hour place in Victoria Island." She cut me off. "They're quick and they're discreet. I'll drive. Get your purse." There was no arguing with her. She was a force of nature, a hurricane of efficiency and righteous anger on my behalf. The drive through the sleeping city was surreal. The bright lights of Zixi felt a world away from the quiet pain in my living room. At the clinic, Elenina handled everything, her voice calm and authoritative as she spoke to the receptionist. I felt like a ghost, a spectator to my own life as I was wheeled into a small, cold examination room that smelled of antiseptic. The doctor, a young man with kind, tired eyes, asked me questions I couldn't answer. I just shook my head and looked at Elena, who explained the situation in clipped medical terms, omitting the personal details but conveying the severity. After what felt like an eternity, I was back in the small room. The chill of the X-ray machine still on my skin. Elenina sat with me in silence. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say until we saw the truth. The doctor re-entered, his kind expression now shaded with gravity. In his hand, he held a large translucent film. He didn't say a word as he walked over to the light box on the wall and clipped the film into place. He flipped a switch. A stark white light illuminated the image from behind. It was a geography of my own bones, a landscape of black and gray. And there, in the delicate curve where my leg met my pelvis, was a thin, shockingly clear white line. A crack in the foundation of me. The doctor pointed to it with the tip of his pen. "The X-ray confirms it," he said, his voice gentle but absolute. "It's a non-displaced fracture of the femoral neck. A clean break. You need to stay off this leg completely." The image, the diagnosis, the simple, undeniable object hanging in the light changed everything. It was no longer a matter of my word against theirs. It was a medical record. It was proof. The pain in my heart now had a picture, a name, and a cold, hard legal reality. I remember the day I took Leo to open his first savings account. He was 10 years old, his legs barely reaching the floor as he sat in the big chair opposite the bank teller. I showed him how to sign his name on the line, my hand guiding his. He was so proud of the careful way he formed the letters, a serious look of concentration on his face. I was proud too. I was teaching him responsibility, the value of his name, the power of a signature. I never imagined that one day I would be sitting in another bank using my own signature to dismantle his entire world. That was the thought that echoed in my head the next morning, Tuesday, as Elenina drove us towards Lekki. The Lagos go-slow traffic was in full force. A chaotic symphony of car horns, street vendors shouting prices for plantain chips and phone charges, and the hazy morning sun filtering through the Hamilton dust. But inside the car there was a heavy, determined silence. Elenina had insisted I not wait. "Justice, like a good stew, is best served hot," she declared. My hip throbbed with every bump in the road, a grim metronome counting down to the moment I would change our lives forever. The bank was an oasis of cold air and quiet order. The polished marble floors gleamed under the recessed lighting, and men and women in crisp, sharp suits moved with a hushed importance. Elenina helped me navigate on the crutches the clinic had provided. Her presence a silent solid wall of support. Our appointment was with the branch manager, a woman named Mrs. Adebayo. She was formidable, dressed in a tailored anchor suit, her expression professional but not unkind. She ushered us into a glass-walled office, offering us water and a comfortable seat. Her eyes lingered for a moment on my bruised face and the crutches propped beside my chair, but she was too professional to comment. I had the folder from my husband's oak box. My hands were perfectly steady as I pushed it across her desk. "I am the primary co-signer and collateral holder on a mortgage for my son, Leo Petrova," I began, my voice clear and even. "I am here to invoke the collateral withdrawal clause. I want my name and my property completely removed from the agreement effective immediately." Mrs. Adebayo's expression didn't change, but she studied me intently. She opened the folder and reviewed the documents, her sharp eyes scanning the legal text. She saw my signature, my name tied inextricably to his. "This is a significant step, Mrs. Petrova," she said calmly. "To be clear, invoking this clause will immediately put the mortgage in default. The bank will call in the entire loan. Your son and his wife will have a very short window to secure new financing or pay the balance in full. If they cannot, they will lose the house." She was giving me an out, a moment to reconsider the sheer devastation of the act. I looked past her through the glass wall of her office to the bustling city outside. I thought of Leo's cold eyes, of Chloe's cruel smile, of the hard stone steps and the click of the lock. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but they don't tell you how heavy that dish is to carry, or how much it feels like you are poisoning yourself as well. "Do you think I went too far?" "I am fully aware of the consequences," I said, my gaze returning to hers, unwavering. "Please prepare the necessary paperwork." For the next hour, I signed. My signature, once a tool of love and support, was now a weapon. I signed with the black ink of the manager's expensive pen. Each loop and line a deliberate, methodical severing of the ties that bound me to my son. I signed away the house. I signed away my risk. And I signed away the last foolish remnants of the mother I used to be. When it was over, I felt strangely hollow. The ride back to my house was a mother is supposed to build a home for her son. I had just signed the demolition order for his. That was the first clear thought that cut through the silence after Mrs. Adebio's call. The finality of it settled, not with a crash, but with a quiet, unnerving calm. The war was declared, the first shot fired, and now my world had shrunk to the four walls of my living room, and the silent ticking clock on the mantelpiece. It was a beautiful clock carved from dark Ioko wood, a gift from my late husband on our 10th anniversary. He'd bought it from a master craftsman in Benin City, and its deep, sonorous chime had marked the hours of my life for over 30 years. It had marked Leo's birth, his first steps, the day he'd left for university. Now each tick felt like a countdown to an explosion. The sound was all I had. The hum of the ceiling fan, the distant rumble of an ocard on the main road, the mournful cry of the muezzin calling the faithful to afternoon prayer. Every sound in the city seemed to accentuate the profound silence in my house, and the even deeper silence from my phone. It sat on the small table beside me, dark and inert, a sleeping viper. For 3 hours, I sat in my armchair, a prisoner of my own decision. My hip was a dull, persistent fire, a constant reminder of the reason for this war. I took my medication, the pills rattling in my hand. I forced myself to eat a few bites of the jollof rice Elenina had left, the spicy sweet taste foreign on my tongue. Every action felt detached, as if I were watching a stranger move through the motions of my life. My mind was a battlefield. Was this justice? Or was it just a wound I had inflicted on myself despite the one who wounded me first? They say you should never make a permanent decision based on a temporary emotion. But what if the emotion isn't temporary? What if the pain reveals a truth you've been avoiding for years? The truth was, the boy I loved was gone. I had been pouring my love into a memory, and the man who wore his face had used that love to break me. This wasn't revenge against my son. It was self-defense against a stranger. I was mourning the son I lost, and in a strange, terrible way, I was also mourning the soft-hearted mother he had forced me to kill. The clock on the mantelpiece began to chime. 1, 2, 3. It was 3:07 p.m. 3 hours exactly. As if summoned by the final chime, the small dark rectangle on the table beside me lit up. The screen glowed with a single word that now felt like an obscenity. Leo. The phone began to vibrate, a low, urgent hum against the polished wood. The sound was jarring, violent in the quiet room. I stared at it, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I did not move. I did not breathe. I let it ring and ring and ring until it fell silent. The screen showed one missed call for a single blessed second. There was silence again. Then the screen lit up once more. Leo. It vibrated again, more insistently this time. I let it go to voicemail. It stopped. It immediately started again. A text message notification flashed across the top. Then another. The missed call notification popped up again. 2 missed calls. He called again. 3 missed calls. Again, 4. The calls became a frantic overlapping barrage. The text notifications piled up one after another. The small banners of his words unread but still screaming for my attention. The phone was no longer a sleeping viper. It was a rabid animal, thrashing and glowing and buzzing on the table. It was the physical manifestation of his dawning panic, a beacon of his terror. I watched, my face impassive as the counter of his desperation climbed. 5 missed calls. 12:21. The number kept rising. A frantic digital scream I refused to answer. The storm I had been waiting for had finally made landfall. The phone finally fell silent, its screen glowing with the grotesque tally of his panic. 53 missed calls. The barrage had lasted 17 minutes. My thumb, moving with a will of its own, slid across the screen and silenced the notifications. For a moment, I just looked at the icon for his messages. A small bubble containing a number so large it was simply displayed as 99+. Each one of those unread messages was a piece of him, a shard of his true self he had hurled at me from across the city. With a deep breath that did nothing to calm the throbbing in my hip, I opened them. The very first message sent at 3:08 p.m. was the one that set the tone for everything that followed. It wasn't a question about my health or safety. It was a command. The bank sent some crazy notice about the house. Whatever joke you're playing, it needs to stop. Call me now. The shocking revelation wasn't that he was angry. It was that his first immediate instinct was to assume I was a problem to be managed, not a mother who might be hurt. The tea Elenina had made for me sat on the table, now cold. I took a sip, but the sweet milky taste had turned to ash in my mouth. My finger began to scroll upwards, moving through the digital diary of his unraveling. The cold, smooth glass of the phone screen felt like a barrier between me and the ugly emotions radiating from his words. The messages were a cascade of escalating hysteria. They began with arrogant demands. This is a mistake. You need to call the bank and fix this immediately. Then they shifted to manipulative pleading. Each word a bitter taste of betrayal. Chloe is having contractions from the stress. Do you want to be responsible for hurting your own grandchild? He weaponized the baby, the one I had knitted a yellow blanket for with such love. That memory now felt like a lifetime ago. It's a strange thing to read an obituary for a love you thought was alive. Have you ever had to accept a truth so ugly it changed your memory of everything that came before? As I scrolled, the shock at this hidden truth settled into something colder and harder. I saw his true character, stripped of the charming veneer I had loved my entire life. There was no empathy, no concern, only a raw, desperate selfishness that was astonishing in its purity. The messages became more frantic. Mom, I'm begging you. Please, they're going to take our home. And finally came the threats. If you don't answer this phone, I swear to God, I'm coming over there right now. I read every last word. I absorbed the full measure of his ugliness, letting it cauterize the last of my maternal grief. When I reached the top, I felt a profound, chilling emptiness. The son I had adored was a complete stranger, a hollow man who saw me not as his mother, but as a bank vault he had lost the key to. With a strange sense of peace, I began to delete them one by one. His rage, his pleas, his threats erased, his panic erased. The man he had revealed himself to be erased. It was a cleansing, a final act of letting go. I deleted the last message and was about to put the phone down when a sound from outside ripped through the quiet of my home. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the screech of tires, the slam of a car door, and then heavy, frantic footsteps pounding up my walkway. A second later, a violent bang shook my entire front door, rattling the Aoka wood in its frame. Mom. The voice that roared my name was not the voice of my son. It was a roar, ragged bellow of pure fury, the sound of a cornered animal. Another thunderous blow struck the door. Open this door. Open it right now. He was here. He had ignored the warning. He had ignored my reply. He had crossed the final line, bringing his rage directly to the home he was no longer welcome in. And I was inside alone with a broken hip, and the terrifying knowledge that the monster I had just seen on my phone was now trying to break down my door. The man roaring on the other side of my door was a stranger, but the fear he ignited was ancient and primal. For a heartbeat, the old Natalia wanted to cower, to hide, to wait for the storm to pass, but she was gone. I picked up my phone, my fingers moving with a cold, steady purpose. My first call was to Elenina. He's here, I said, my voice a low, steady whisper. He's trying to break down the door. I'm calling the estate security. Her response was immediate and fierce. Don't you dare open it. I'm on my way. My second call was to the security gate of our estate. I gave my address and a simple, undeniable report. There is a man trying to forcibly enter my home. Then I put the phone down. Leaning heavily on my crutches, I made my way to the door, the wood vibrating with each furious blow. I did not open it. I pressed my forehead against the cool, solid wood, and spoke, my voice devoid of the warmth he had known his entire life. It was a long-hidden secret I'd kept even from myself. The voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose. "You are not welcome here, Leo," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the door. "Leave my property now, or you will be removed." A shocked silence fell on the other side. He had expected tears. Please, a fight. He had not expected this calm, steel authority. Then the rage returned, laced now with disbelief. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Not open the door. We need to fix this." "There is nothing to fix," I said, my voice as cold as the marble on his kitchen floor. "You were told to stay away." "This is you once again, ignoring my words. You have 5 seconds before I consider you a threat to my safety." I began to count slowly, deliberately. 1, 2, 3. Before I reached 4, I heard him back away from the door. I moved, my crutches thudding softly on the floor to the living room window. Peeking through the curtains, I saw him. He was standing in the middle of my lawn, his hands clenched into fists, his face a contorted mask of fury and confusion. He looked lost. He saw me then, a silhouette in the window. Our eyes met through the glass. And in that moment, as he saw me standing there, broken but unbowed, leaning on the crutches that were a testament to his violence, his entire demeanor shattered. The sight of me, the reality of what he had done, hit him like a physical blow. His face, which had been red with rage, crumpled. His shoulders slumped. The anger vanished, replaced by a raw, racking grief. He stumbled forward and pressed his hands and forehead against the window pane, his body shaking with deep, gut-wrenching sobs. "Mom," he wept, his voice muffled by the glass, the words torn from him. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. I didn't know." Can a person truly be sorry for the crime, or are they just sorry they got caught? It's a question you have to ask when you see a monster weep. I watched him cry, but I felt nothing. No pity, no flicker of the old love, only a vast, sterile emptiness. As he stood there weeping against my window, a silent pulse of blue and red light swept across his face. A security vehicle from the estate gate had pulled up quietly to the curb. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, their expressions calm and serious. Leo looked up, his face stricken with a new kind of terror. He saw the officers and then his eyes darted back to me. He finally understood. I wasn't playing a game. The officers approached him calmly. I could hear their muffled voices as they asked him to step away from the house. As one of them spoke into his radio, Leo's phone, which he was clutching in a white-knuckled grip, lit up with an incoming call. In a last desperate gesture of confusion, he looked down at the screen. His face went from pale to ghostly white. His eyes widened in what looked like pure terror. He turned and held the phone up, pressing the screen against the window for me to see. It was a desperate, nonsensical act, a final plea for me to understand something. The most painful betrayals don't come from a sudden, clumsy act of violence. They come from a plan. Seeing the name of the bank manager glowing on my son's screen, I understood with chilling clarity that my son hadn't just stumbled into cruelty. He had been a willing pawn in a meticulous, calculated game to steal my entire future. The betrayal wasn't that he pushed me down the stairs. It was that he had led me to the edge on purpose. By the time Elenina arrived, her face a mask of fierce determination, the estate security was calmly escorting a now silent and ghost-white Leo into the back of their vehicle. He didn't resist. He looked utterly defeated, not by the officers, but by the name he had so foolishly revealed on his phone. Later, sitting in my quiet living room with Elenina, the ugly truth pieced itself together. I remembered a stray comment Chloe had made weeks ago, something about her influential anti-funker at the bank. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now it was the key that unlocked everything. The plan was never just to get a house. It was to get my house. Chloe and her aunt, the bank manager, had orchestrated it all. They needed my signature, my assets as collateral. The final step would have been to manufacture a crisis, push me out, and when the mortgage inevitably defaulted, Aunt Funker would ensure the bank seized my property, the home I had built with my husband, as payment, leaving me with nothing. The assault was just a clumsy mistake. A moment their cold plan boiled over into hot violence, when I didn't simply vanish as expected. The following days were not filled with rage or grief. They were filled with a quiet, methodical purpose. With Elenina by my side, I met with my lawyer, a sharp older woman who listened to my story with a deepening frown. I gave her the medical report, the security incident number, and the names Leo Petrova, Chloe Adebayo Petrova, and Funka Adebayo. The sound of her pen scratching against her legal pad was the sound of my new future being written. My instructions were simple. First, her firm was to launch a full investigation into professional misconduct and conspiracy to commit fraud against the bank manager using the evidence of the phone call as the starting point. Second, a restraining order was to be filed against both my son and his wife. The third and final instruction was the heaviest. I want to amend my will, I told my lawyer, my voice as steady as the Ruco clock on my mantle. My son Leo Petrova is to be completely and irrevocably disinherited. Everything I own, my home, my savings, my portfolio will be placed in a trust. It will be used to fund a new charity here in Laros dedicated to providing legal and medical support for elderly people who have suffered abuse at the hands of their own families. My lawyer looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Are you certain?" she asked. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life," I replied. Weeks passed. The legal machinery turned. Funker Adebayo was suspended from her position pending the investigation. The house, their cold white palace, was foreclosed upon. And one evening, there was a soft, hesitant knock on my door. I looked at the security camera feed. It was Leo. He looked thin, haunted. I did not open the door. I pressed the button on the intercom. "What do you want, Leo?" His voice, when it came, was a broken whisper, the sound of a man who had lost everything. "Mom, please don't do this. The will, the charity, it's everything Dad left for us, for our family." I thought of the lopsided birdhouse on my porch, a relic of a boy who never truly existed. I thought of his last text to me, the command that had started it all. "You told me to stay away from you, Leo," I said, my voice calm, clear, and final. "I'm finally listening. It turns out staying away from you is the only way I can truly stay safe." I cut the connection, the sound of his desolate cry dissolving into silence. I stood there for a long moment, not in anger, not in triumph, but in peace. I had survived. The greatest strength isn't in how much you can give, but in knowing finally when to stop giving to those who only know how to take. Sometimes the most powerful act of love is not for a child or a partner, but for yourself. The love required to close a door and never ever look back. What do you think? Did Leo and Chloe get what they deserved, or did my revenge go too far?